So just a quick walk through our agenda. I'll be going through the welcome and reflection, and also we'll be reviewing just some of our context, norms, and the standard materials and templates that we have. Next, we're going to be going through our work group updates, and we will be sharing with you the new method we'll be using for sharing our work group updates and synergies. And then we will go through a quick update on the co-design process and see how that's going for everyone. And Liz will be leading us in a process for discussing the additional funding that we have, and then announcements and next steps. So the reflection for today is a quote by Brian Stevenson, and I was just reading one of his books, so that he was on my mind, and that's why I chose this quote. And it reads, "You don't change the world with the ideas in your mind, but with the conviction in your heart." And you can feel free to chat in or speak aloud any reflections you have to this quote. And feel free to continue to chat in. I'm just going to start reading off a couple. Sarah says, "You need to feel something to be inspired to act." Shamika says she loves this quote. "It's the conviction that moves that passion when leading from within." Bernice shares that it shows the importance of both heart and mind in strengthening efforts towards change. Heart helps with perseverance during challenges. And Brittany writes, "This makes me think of readiness. You can have all the ideas, but without motivation, you're not going to do anything." Chelsea says, "This quote reminds me of connection to the work. While you can understand and intellectualize work, real change happens when you're emotionally committed to creating change." And Liz reflects that, "I think that in order to see an idea through, you need the conviction in your heart to do it. We can have many ideas, although conviction is what catalyzes and inspires us to act on them." Will writes, "A good idea doesn't get very far without conviction, for sure." And sort of my reflection of this quote is that a lot of the work that we're doing now is very person-oriented, and there is a lot of revolutionary ideas coming out of scale and 100 million more broadly. So I believe that all of this work is possible in part due to the passion and the dedication of everyone on the project. And I can definitely feel that everyone has conviction behind the work and is really dedicated to it. And Marie writes, "I think too often we get caught up in ideas, and ideas without conviction and heart are kind of empty," which I definitely agree. And lastly, I'm going to read out Pam's, which is "Compassion with sweat equity." You can continue to chat in your responses, and we can move on to the next part of our agenda. Thank you, everyone, for sharing.
Thank you so much, BC and Liz, for the wonderful introduction. I'm going to start us off by talking about our proposed norms. We've decided on shared decision making for this portion of the work, regular check-ins within work groups to check in on both workload and to really understand what is possible. Prioritizing a limited set of topics within your work group so that all of the work is complete by July 31st. Being creative of which materials that we use in our work. There's a number of different tools that we have used throughout the movement, so we would like individuals to think outside of the box. And finally, thinking of creative ways to find synergy between other work groups. Next slide, please. And so with that, and building on the synergy piece, we've created a new spreadsheet to give updates of both your work group and to see what other groups are doing during this period. So we're going to pause for a few minutes so individuals can both type in to the first tab their scope of work for your work, and in the second tab adding in kind of what is your most recent update for June and for the first phase of your work. And you can also feel free to, oh, thanks, Liz. You can also feel free to call out if you have any synergies. You can comment them into either the Excel sheet or verbalize them on this call, whichever you prefer. And I'm going to pause for until about 1:16 so individuals can take some time to fill in updates. Before I pause, are there any questions? And if there are no questions, you can click the no button.
Chelsea, this is Liz. I wanted to share that, for example, for the scope of work on tab 1 for developing a Chile-like experience, we are working and finalizing that today in our work group call that we have this evening. And so I put, we're still working on this and we'll update this later as an example. So even if you don't necessarily feel like you have a scope of work defined, I think it would be helpful to note that in the scope of work column.
Thank you so much for adding that in, Liz. Any other questions? All right, I'll take the silence as a no. Let's regroup at 1:17, and if anyone else has any questions, feel free to message me or the group, and I'll respond. Give everyone one more minute to just finish everything up, and then we'll share out based off of what individuals have written. Thank you, everyone, for what you have written. As we mentioned in the chat, this will be a living document. So please feel free to, if you are unable to finish or if you have others from your group who would like to add in input, please feel free to update this at any point. For future calls, we will send this link out before the call so individuals can come to this meeting with their updates already in the spreadsheet. You can also use this sheet to call out or tag individuals specifically if you would like to learn more about their work or collaborate on a specific piece of work. With that said, would anyone like to share out briefly a little bit about what they're doing or a bright spot in their work so far? If no one would like to share, please feel free to refer back to the document and review them as we continue in the next few weeks. Next slide, please. We used our last call to go over the different materials and templates, and we discussed kind of the components of each of them. Are there any questions on the templates that we have provided or ways to format the final materials? Oh,
Mecca.
hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there's
Hey,
a
can you hear me? I had a quick question. I guess I keep circling around to the implementation guide. One of the things that we were looking for, I don't think we have completed the implementation guide for PLE before because I think it was too jargony the first time. So we just went with a live stories as our kind of product. I really would look to pursue doing the implementation guide.
Shemeka, you're all garbly. We heard you okay, and then you went garbly. Sorry, girl.
Okay. How about now?
It was a little bit better at first. Could you try saying one other statement?
Hey, can you hear me? Thanks, Jonathan.
I can hear you better, but not great still.
Oh, man. Okay. I'll
Oh,
type it in
you
the
sound
bottom.
good now. Oh, you sound great now.
Oh, I won't move. I'm asking about the implementation guide. So I don't think we did one in the last scale 1.0 transition. We chose the live stories route, and we're really trying to create one this time. And what we're finding from the feedback from our listening sessions is that even with the existing live stories toolkit and synthesis report, the communities are reporting either never seeing it before or never having it as a tool that they could use. So I want to bring that back to this space as we are moving forward to create more implementation guides. How are we measuring whether or not the communities are using them?
That's a great question. The way that we'll basically be deploying these tools into the communities will really be dependent on this next phase of work and how we kind of structure our work to bring in different and onboard different community groups. So in short, we're kind of still thinking through that, and I think that I also like to hear what Liz thinks on this, but in my opinion, I think it'd be great to even hear from you and the communities that you all have worked with on ways to kind of make these tools and resources a lot more accessible as we build out our work. Liz, did you have any other thoughts consistent with what you're thinking?
That is consistent. Only to underscore that, I don't know, other than posting it, I don't know if we have a way yet of tracking like the downloads or how many times folks utilize a resource. I think that's something that we'll have to think more about, and really appreciate, Shemeka, you're bringing this to this group, and would love to hear like others' ideas and thoughts over time on ways that we can better do that and make these and track whether or not these resources are actually being used. So definitely still in development, as Chelsea mentioned.
Definitely. And we can also maybe even touch base with the tech team to see if they have access to any of that data as well.
This is Will. Can I make a couple of recommendations to consider?
Please.
Sure.
So first off, I just want to appreciate Shemeka's comment because I think she may have highlighted something that I think a lot of us feel about our own content from prior scale experiences, and that is that we sort of develop it and then it's unclear where you might find those tools and also who's then accessing the tools and using them. So I just wanted to give Shemeka a shout out because I've actually used the resource that she developed, the live story tools, but the way I found those was I had to go to previous presentations at scale events and then click links, and it wasn't very obvious. I had to do deep research on engaging with lived experience. And not only did our community use it, but I've also shared it out with some other colleagues in the field. So other neighborhoods in San Francisco have taken a look and found that stuff really, really valuable. But there's no way that anyone would know about that except for that I have that information. But I think my recommendations are to have on the 100 Million Healthier Lives website, I know under, I think, resources, there's like a whole slew of things, some of which are affiliated with the scale project that we're on and some of which aren't. And it would be really useful to have like a scale regions of solution, reports and tools section that people could just go to. So all of us know where our content is. And I think the internal version of that is the 100 Million Healthier Lives community, which I believe is being redesigned anyway, but all of those should be available there as well. So there's kind of an external place to gather them and maybe an internal place. That would be a start place. I don't know how you track that stuff. Sometimes you can use, internet stuff, internet tracker stuff, but just a thought.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Will. And it's exciting to hear that you've been using Shemeka's resources over time as well. I do know that right now, the 100 Million Healthier Lives website, in addition to kind of all the other technology tools and resources, are in the process of being redesigned so that through a single search, you'll be brought to all of the lived experience, for example, resources and tools and information that we have collected over these last few years. And that's something that we're working towards. It's not complete yet, but hopefully we'll have some of that finished as we move into our next phase. Are there any other thoughts or questions on this?
I see a chat from Bernice that reads that another thing that was lifted up in their people with lived experience listening sessions is use of less jargon for any existing tools so that they're more usable. And communities using resources have mentioned challenges due to jargon and resources being more academic in framework, and that it was also lifted up that receiving links is not enough, and communities mentioned needing navigational guidance for the tools and use of tools as well. Thank you, Bernice. That's really helpful and makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. I'm also seeing a comment from Sarah, who is on the design team, and will pass some of this information on. So thank you, Sarah. Are there any other thoughts or questions on the materials or templates, or the templates for the materials for right now? Great. Feel free to chat anything in, and I'll respond if there are any other questions in the chat. Next slide, please. So one other thing that we have mentioned is the idea of co-design and evaluating co-design through a debrief template. A few weeks ago, Holly graciously provided us with a link to a template that she has used before, and we have shared it out with groups, and we are wondering, have you tested it yet? Is this something that you would like to test? And if you have tested it, how has the test worked so far? So I'm going to give individuals a few moments to review the file, and I'd love to hear from any individuals who have either considered using this as a resource or has begun using it as a resource.
Laura, and I am sorry because I think both work groups I'm involved with misunderstood. We were waiting on, we've even talked about, we thought that you were going to, we were going to have a meeting about that. And I think we thought this meeting was maybe going to include that, where we'd come up with questions that we would ask across all the work groups if they're willing, wanting, and able.
Yes.
And I know Becky Henry submitted some questions too.
Sure. So we had it on the agenda for our last work group meeting, and since we spent a lot of time going through the material templates, we didn't have enough time to really go through this in depth. So we sent out the link for individuals to review offline. And I didn't hear about the questions that were raised. Could you repeat that portion?
Yeah, I submitted on Becky Henry's behalf ideas she had, and I think I did it in the chat and perhaps forwarded an email. I did it in the chat last time and perhaps forwarded an email. I'm not sure if I forwarded the email, but I think I did. But I know I put it in the chat of last meeting. And again, our confusion was we thought there was going to be, we'd come up with agreement on what those questions would be, and so we were holding off. So I apologize for my misunderstanding, and I'm really excited because we were hungry to do it. We're like, well, we'll hold off. So we thought we were just going to agree to it as a team, as this big team.
Thank you for your comments. I think that it is up to the team to decide how much we would like to adhere to this guide or go away from it. So I will put myself on mute and let everyone kind of discuss which method or route they prefer.
Thanks, Chelsea. And I'm happy to, I'm chatting in the debrief template that Holly had shared into the chat right now. And then I'm also happy to look for the chat, Laura, from the last meeting so that we can include the questions that Becky had proposed also for folks to review.
And I would love to hear from others who have different strengths than I. But I think it would be super helpful to have the same questions, even if people wanted to add an additional question or something or two, but to have at least a couple of the questions be in common across all the work groups. So we'd really get a feel for what does co-design entail and the good, the bad, the ugly with co-design. And I think that, I don't know, I'm not an evaluator or researcher, but I think that would behoove us. I'd love to hear from others.
Shameka here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay!
Okay. So we had our engagement leaders team did this for ourselves internally at the end of our last meeting, kind of walking through. We did find that we had to adapt live just based on, you know, some of the wording and the questions, but we were able to kind of, I guess, begin the process of using this as a tool, or we're adding it to our agenda for our next meeting tomorrow as well. So we are kind of testing it live among us internally, but I guess, am I hearing that it's for the whole group? So should we be asking also getting feedback from our writers or contributors or viewers that are in our groups, that we should walk through the process before we release them from the calls, potentially?
Again, I think that's one of those things that will be up to this group to decide on who and in what ways we would like to get this information from groups. I think it sounds like a great idea to ask team members before calls conclude kind of what their perspective is using these questions or any other questions that may be relevant for each specific work group. But I'd also like to hear what others think of this as well. And if anyone doesn't have any thoughts on this, we can also just vote to make sure everyone is on the same page on the processes described. Maybe if people would like to vote, they can put vote in the chat, and if maybe if people still have questions, they can put the questions into the chat. Does that process sound okay for everyone?
That process sounds good to me. Thanks, Chelsea. I'm not sure how others feel.
Will is a bit confused. Understandable. So right now we're kind of thinking about what method would be the most effective. We're coming to a decision on how to use the debrief template in each individual work group. So there was one question that was on kind of, are we allowed to add questions to this template, or is this the template that we're going, well, first, is this the template we're going to move forward with? And then if so, are we able to add questions to it? And then finally, should each team be asking the full work group to answer these questions at the conclusion of each call? And those are the three questions that I've captured, but maybe I see Laura has chatted in. There are a few other messages as well.
I just chatted in something from Laura with, oh, and she did as well. Okay, that's what it was. Becky's suggestions for questions.
Great.
And then this is Laura, and just for the context, I think that might help. And my recollection is that we thought, wow, co-designing and distributed leadership are really important and unique ways to lead and to facilitate. And there's not a lot that we really, I'll speak for myself, but I think others too, know about what really works in co-design and what really works in distributed leadership. And so we were just thinking about, gosh, if we're focusing on co-design and distributed leadership during this interim period, wouldn't it be great if we learned more about if we're being effective and learn what's working and what's not working to distribute leadership and co-design. So that's sort of the context that I recall. Others might have a different perspective.
Thank you, Laura, for providing that context. Sarah and Will, does that make a bit more sense?
Yes.
Will mentioned in the chat that he thinks so and that things are a bit clearer. Great. So let's maybe begin by voting on kind of the template to use for debrief for each group. Can we have a vote? People vote. Maybe individuals can vote yes or no using the emoticons on the participants tab, or using the debrief template and the questions that Becky has provided as for each work group to kind of gauge how the process is going. And maybe we can see if individuals can vote yes using the yes emoticon and no using the no emoticon. And if you're having trouble with that, feel free to just chat it in or speak it out if you're calling in. And I'm seeing a question or a chat from Shemeka on the worry of this adding on time to calls. Individuals can also fill out these questions or forms and send them to the leads at the conclusion of each call to use up less of that time, and so that people can fill it out on their own time. Sarah says, I like the idea of each group either using this template or their own version, and maybe they report back on what they use at the end of this process. Sarah, I also think that idea would work well. And what I sent earlier concerning the vote. My vote, debriefing template is a very useful tool if it enables flexibility and adaptability in the meetings. It has worked well thus far for our meetings. That's great, Bernice. Laura said that Holly shared it to this group to have this group modify it. Yes, I think any work group can modify it as needed. Is an email follow-up okay? Yes, an email follow-up should be okay. And then Liz mentioned that she likes the idea of following up with Sarah. So I'm seeing right now that only a few people voted for kind of keeping with this existing template. Let's instead have individual work groups kind of figure out which template works best considering the content of each work group, and then report back and let us know what has worked well and what hasn't. Does that sound like a better idea for those who don't currently like using this existing template with adaptations for on each work group's end?
This is Laura. I'm looking. I know Jonathan, you're on the call, and I posed a thought/question and so was trying to solicit people with different strengths than I who have more evaluation research. And specifically, I was asking about having common questions across each work group so we could really learn about distributed leadership and co-design. And then the ability for people to add on, work groups to add on if they so desired. So I'd love to have your perspective, Jonathan. I'm sorry I'm calling you out, but I am.
I mean, so like, I guess my reaction is like it may make sense to have common questions. And we would have to be sure that it wouldn't constrain what each work group is trying to do. Like I wouldn't want to force, or I would hate for the questions to sort of push people in a certain direction when that might not be necessary. Or it might be not against. It might be not what people were thinking about doing. And maybe what we could do is like maybe like if we could have like a common format for summary sheets that everyone does like what this is about, what how can people use this, how is this developed, maybe something like that. I'm just sort of talking out loud. Or thinking out loud. So this is now I'm getting to the point where I'm not sure, but it's a reasonable question and potentially something that could be really useful.
So when you look at Becky Henry's question, and I'm thinking there might be a nugget or two within Holly's as well for our purposes. Did the target audience participate in this meeting? That's from Becky Henry. No, yes, but to a lesser degree than others, yes, to an equal or greater. And, Becky just throwing this out. During this meeting, did we finalize, adapt, or approve strategies or plans that were developed with and by the members of the target audience? No, yes, that. So hers are fairly quick. And I don't know, Jonathan, but I'm wondering, like, to me, I don't think that would confine. I don't think that I would find that confining, but others might. That's just my perspective. Thanks, Bernice. And Fran, I think yours is like an adaptation of Becky's. Is that right, Fran? Are you there, Fran?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm probably, I'm probably overthinking this, Laura, and you and Becky are probably right on that.
Well, and I swear I'm not looking to be right. I'm just like, oh, I thought we were on to something. I thought there was a lot of enthusiasm about it, and then I just think we ran out of time at the last meeting. But I feel like we were just, it wasn't just like a few people who chimed in. We sort of like, oh yeah, that sounds good.
Hey, this is Fran. Can you hear me?
Hey, Fran.
Hey, I'm here. I don't know why I just lost the chat, just fell off my computer. But I was chatting in that this debrief template is really helpful. I like it. We're using it now with our coalition meetings, and I think the questions that Becky recommended could be tucked right into the process and relationship section. And there is actually a question sort of at the end of the relationship section that kind of refers to that anyway. So I think you could use the same tool and just kind of adapt it
Mm-hmm.
to make sure you're including the audience that you're looking at, or
yeah,
the
and then
members that you're talking
how
to.
long does it take you, Fran, at your meetings where you use
It
with your coalition?
literally takes 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, it actually
That's
takes
good
a little
to know.
bit longer. We used to do like more 1 to 5 checkoffs, and that was a little faster, but it was also not as rich. The information that we're getting back from this tool is a lot more nuanced. You know, it's a lot more helpful, really. So I'm complete. I suggest using it if people can take a few minutes. It's worth time.
Shemeka and Bernice, I know Shemeka, I think you were saying, oh, that might take too much time, and not in a bad way, but just like we were, of course, like, ooh, that could take a lot of time. 5 minutes, does that alleviate any concerns? And especially if you could do it at the end of the meeting or post-meeting even?
I imagine it's something to consider. Oh, go ahead, Bernie.
That was actually Fran jumping in, and we have people write it at our meetings, so it takes 5 minutes, but everybody's doing it at this time. And if everyone was talking at a call, it would take longer than that. So I'm just making sure that's kind of clear. It would take longer than 5 minutes, I'm sure, if you're talking about it.
Yeah, that's that was what I wanted to lift up because we are virtual. I mean, people are very open and very. It would be helpful, but I just don't know if we have the capacity. So that's why I was asking to see if it could be something that we could write. Well, we could have our partners kind of fill out as a midweek follow-up a few days after. So I guess I'd ask that if we, after our previous week's meeting, maybe 2 or 3 days, could we just do a check-in with this to see what stood out, what stuck with them after sitting with the experience?
So I do know that when we discussed this previously, we didn't decide on doing a one single template for each group or having everyone use the same exact template. And it seems like the group is going more towards that direction right now. I'd like to propose having a group of individuals volunteer some time to kind of think about what a template could look like that would work for most of these different groups. And maybe we can bring that back to either our next work group or send it out to groups over email to begin implementing within each specific work group. Just to be mindful of time and knowing that I know Liz has some pieces on the agenda that she'll need to speak to. What do you all think? Are you all okay with kind of having a separate work group think about what a debrief template could look like for each project team?
This is Sarah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think for me, and I don't mean to be speaking from my group, but for my group, but like we're meeting Friday, which I don't even know what day that is, tomorrow or the next day. But we're meeting really soon, and so we need something that we can use now, and I don't think we can wait for that. So if it were me, like Fran's in my group, so I'm just going to probably ask her to share what she's used with her coalition, and we're just going to try that because everyone's so busy, and I think the summer's already moving way too fast for my taste. And I just kind of want to move, I just kind of want to move if I know that's like not as participatory, but I think at this point, like we need something that we can try on Friday, that we can maybe modify if the work group comes up with something different, but that's kind of my proposal for what we will try.
Thank you for
that's
sharing.
Okay.
I think it's completely fine. We wanted to really have this debrief tool since I think groups proposed it as an idea to be tested, and it sounds like some work groups might already be doing their own thing to measure in debrief for each group. So it might be best for individuals to kind of take these templates as examples of what could be an evaluation tool and adapting it as needed for each specific group. And even if that means using a different type of tool. There's some agreement with that as well.
Hey, this is Fran again, and I don't know the technology in this, but I know we use it in paper at meetings and on a phone or with a Zoom call or something like this, which is what our calls are going to be. I think it would be harder, but I was just wondering if there was some way we could make it into a Survey Monkey, because we're doing a really good job making Survey Monkeys. And if that was something quick that people could do afterwards, or even right at the meeting, given the link, it might be more doable.
Definitely, Fran. I think you can, I think a Survey Monkey or a Google form either is great. Whatever you would like to do or create.
Hi, it's Bernice. I also wanted to lift up, I like everything that's been said as far as the debriefing template and modifying or adapting certain sections for the groups, because it does allow for that, the existing debriefing template under the process and relationships. So I think there's latitude there. But I also wanted to lift up what I found valuable in really voicing the opinions during the call, because sometimes the opinions feed off of one another and one can really understand what truly worked, what didn't work as part of the group dynamics. I know that for the PLE group, I think it took like about 5, 6 minutes at the end of the call. It wasn't long. I understand that there are some who are proposing perhaps sending a link later on, but I think that there's equal value in also expressing it in real time during that moment, as far as what worked and what didn't work in the process for that particular meeting.
Thank you for sharing, Bernice. Could we have 1 or 2 more comments before we move on to the next section of the agenda? And does everyone feel okay with that?
This is Liz. One, I want to thank you, Chelsea, for kind of leading us through this process. And it sounds like there are a lot of really great ideas brewing. And want to lift up that I think that if we are going to leave it up to work groups to sort of decide whether or not to add questions or sort of how to modify it to best fit their work group, that it might make sense to leave it up to them to also decide how to best implement. So whether it's in a Google form or on the call itself. I love that idea, and I think that's a really great learning that you shared, Bernice. And I'm feeling, I think if we want folks to implement now, I'm holding that tension of, I think it makes sense to leave it up to the individual work groups to make that decision, and of course bring back their learnings. And maybe that's like another column or way that we can add in the spreadsheet that we shared earlier, is how you're using the evaluation tool so that we can track usage better as well. I am complete.
So this is Laura. I just modified based on this conversation. I copied the debrief discussion with the implementation team and just tried to put in what I heard suggestions on what questions to pose. I believe that everybody should have access to it. But I don't know, so I'll test it right now. And we don't have to. I can make sure everybody has access to it, or maybe make sure that Chelsea, BC, and or Liz have access to it, and they can grant access to everybody else or something like that. But I did the best I could, very, very swiftly, but I was copying and pasting things in the chat, and I'm sure I missed something, and don't take it personally if I did, but I was trying to, because I think we only have like, what, 6 weeks left, so I'm just, and I really think that this is like a really cool thing if we can implement a tool that will help us learn about distributed leadership and co-design and what works and what doesn't. And I think that would be an amazing gift to 100 million and beyond. I'm complete.
Thank you so much, Laura. And thanks to everyone who has been chatting in different thoughts and opinions and ideas. It's been really great to be a part of this conversation. Liz chatted in our next steps, which are to share suggestions, suggestions in Laura's debrief with this larger group to bring to individual work groups, and we'll also repeat that in our follow-up email. Another next step is including how we will be using this evaluation doc, or how each team will be evaluating, into the larger spreadsheet, so that this will be something that individuals can report on and check in on each week before our larger group calls. Thank you all again, and I'm going to go to the next slide and hand it back over to Liz.
Great. Thank you so much, Chelsea, and for everyone for sharing your ideas. I'm getting really excited about this learning, and looking forward to doing it with all of you. So, process for additional funding. We've received a couple of requests from folks around feeling like maybe they don't have enough time allocated to do the work that they want to do well, and requests for funding along those lines. We are looking right now in our budget. There is a very small chance we might have some unallocated funds available, because budgets are are fairly fluid, especially as like our staff take vacations. That will potentially create more funding for us. Sometimes we have changes in time allocations, or something that we thought would cost an amount actually doesn't end up costing anything, and so we have to be really diligent and responsive as budget changes. And so we recognize that there are many of you that will likely feel like you're putting in more time, or need to put in more time than you are being paid for right now. And so we will want to create an equitable process for sharing funds if we do have them available. One, I will be checking our budget next Wednesday, June 19th, to see if there is any flexible or available funds. And then 2, we will be asking for requests for funding by June 26th, if that is the case. So just to give you a week sort of to think on it and reach out if you feel like you are putting more time towards the work. Please do not do that yet. I'm not sure if we have funding available yet, and I really don't, I don't want you to put in the extra effort of reaching out before then. And then our overall offer is, if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed by the volume of work that you have, we really do want to underscore again that, the scope of each of these products we did not commit to, and really that is up to your work group, and we want it to be manageable. That's something we're trying to be more conscious of, and will continue to do so over time. And so our initial ask is to think about reducing your scope on your work group, so that, and to see what we're able to do by the July 31st deadline. And the reason we're bringing this to the larger group is we recognize that this touches all of you and really wanted to be as transparent as possible about our funding situation. So again, I will be following up by next Wednesday with an update on whether or not we have any funding available. And once you've received that update via email, you can send requests in to me by June 26th. I want to pause here for questions or thoughts. Great. Thank you. As always, I recognize this is somewhat of a sensitive issue, and so if you have any questions that you want to reach out to me directly, I'm more than happy to field those as well. And yes, we'll send out an email, Shemeka, and follow up in our kind of follow-up email as well. We do want this to be open to everyone that's part of the interim and recognize that not everyone's able to join these calls. So if work groups want to share this also on their work group calls and sort of spread the wealth, so to speak, of this information, I think that's a great next step, and I can write that down as well. Thank you for being conscious of that, Shemeka. Great. Thank you again. And just really, I have a lot of appreciation for folks understanding as we're learning our way through this equitable funding process. It's something that we're actively working on and learning from. Yeah, and Laura, your question's great. I think if folks have been doing a time study, it would be great to see sort of what you have been allocating and also what you project to allocate in the next month in a bit. And I'm happy to also write that in the email that I send out on the 19th if we do have funding available. Might be a couple of other questions coming in through the chat, so I am going to pause again as well. Great. So we wanted to also create some space for any announcements folks have. On the next slide, I'll be sharing an announcement related to the evaluation team, and wanted to pause here for others as well. I see a question from Bernice in the chat. It says, lifting up a resource question. For final product, I'm anticipating it is beyond a Word-based product, but you want something that is print ready. Is there a designer? So I think that the document, if folks decide, could ultimately be a Word-based product, and we recognize that many of you will choose to use other platforms such as Live Stories or the Change Library, as we discussed last week. We are, or we will be working with a like IHI based designer for the word based products, and otherwise would love for folks to work with us to create templates that are aligned with that. And I also will pause here. I'm not sure, Chelsea, if you have anything you'd like to add as well.
My only thought is that we do have someone to copy edit from the IHI team, and the whole organization uses her for her copy editing skills. So I would recommend if individuals have things that are ready sooner rather than later, it will increase her likeliness to make sure that she's able to actually review everyone's material before the July 31st deadline. So for example, if you have a section that's ready now, feel free to send it over to us and we can have that reviewed as the work is being completed, so it doesn't have to all be done at once. And I am complete. That's my only other thought, Liz.
Thanks, Chelsea. And as folks are developing products as well, if you could make sure, and I think this will happen naturally, that the project manager on your work group is aware, we will make sure that the branding is consistent across products, because that is something we want to be conscious of as well. Great. Any announcements? Great questions. Any updates to Scale 3.0? That is a good question. Well, we have not yet heard back from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation on whether or not we've received the funding officially. So that is the update I have right now. This is a moment where I'm like, oh gosh, I wish Paul were on the call, because he was really involved in the proposal process and could provide a more thorough update, but that is the information that I have. Thank you. I'm just going, sorry, I'm in the wrong slide. Great, so wanted to share a little bit about the evaluation team and TOAST materials. So Paul was working to pull materials for the following work groups: people with lived experience, race, racism, and equity / caucus, the work group on improvement methods and measurement, and community transformation as well. So I will double check folks' folders. I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but I believe that Paul had been pulling in the TOAST workgroup info directly into the folders. And if not, I can reach out to him about that as well. It's not obligatory to use those materials, although we figured it would be useful for folks to have access to them. And then just once the work groups have decided what content they will develop, so you know, as you're filling out that spreadsheet and the scope of work, we'll be sharing that with the evaluation team as well. And they'll be part of these calls. So as you know, Jonathan and Brittany, I believe, are on this call right now to help us find synergies and ensure consistency, because they're also working on their own products for evaluation also. I will pause here to see if Jonathan or Brittany or others from the evaluation team, if you have anything else you'd like to add.
I don't have anything else from my end.
And this is Brittany. I don't either. I think Liz, what you updated is as far as we are right now. So other than what's been put in that table for the work products we had at the beginning of the call. So
Awesome.
Thanks for the update.
Great. So so it's
Hi,
sufficient for
Bernice.
folks to put. Oh, go ahead, Bernice.
Oh, so sorry. I just wanted to quickly chime in. When you said evaluation, that was just a light bulb in my head, because I just wanted to lift up how wonderful the evaluation team has been with the rich data that they've collected for TOAST, as well as specifically focusing on the PLE data. I've been on calls with Tara, and the rich data is has been very informative thus far in our efforts. So if anyone else, I guess it's sort of a plug-in that if any other group might need data to support their efforts, they have collected a rich compendium of data to help support the deliverables. And so I just wanted to lift that up and thank you, the evaluation team, for doing this.
Thanks so much for the kind words, Bernice. And yes, if any other groups want support from us, please reach out. The information that Paul is putting in the folder should be really helpful, but if you want help, kind of digging into it, yes, please, we want to be as helpful as possible.
Great. Thank you. And I also wanted to double check my understanding, Brittany and Jonathan, that the updates that folks put into the spreadsheet is sufficient for the evaluation team to understand what content they're intending to develop, or should there be an additional step?
Right now, to me, it seems pretty sufficient. I mean, I can dig through a little bit more and put some more thought into that, but I think what's in there right now is really helpful. And if we feel like going through that we need some more information, we can let everyone know. But right now, I feel like it's in a good place.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. And now I will pause for more questions or thoughts around the evaluation team and TOAST materials.
I guess that's it. No more questions?
I guess not now. And my offer is for folks, if they have any questions, so feel free to email me. And I'm happy to be the bridge to the evaluation team, or I imagine that, well, Brittany and Jonathan, would it be okay if folks emailed you as well if they have access to your information?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's always okay to reach out to us, and we'll chat. If you have questions about the evaluation, the TOAST process, just want to chat, we're here.
Great, thank you. I see a question from Laura. That, Brittany, did I hear you correctly? We filled out that Google Doc for the eval team. If so, can't you just get access to each work group's Google Docs? And I'd like to clarify at least the first part, because it was a Google Doc that our operations team had put together, and the intent was actually to facilitate the work group updates. We recognize that folks spent our last call, we wanted to give space and time for folks to give workgroup updates, and yet because these are only an hour and 20 minutes and other things emerge, we realized that it probably would take more time than we have on this call. And so it's a way of, if we send it out earlier, for folks to give their short, brief update and facilitate synergies across groups. And my hope was that rather than doing double work, that the evaluation team could use that to do quick checks on what folks are working on.
Got it. And then I'm not sure, but I'm wondering if that's a task, and I put this earlier in, and maybe it was answers that I got lost in the chat. If that's something that we could ask the project coordinator or project manager to help us with, just to plunk in to that document, or would that be an inappropriate ask?
I think that's totally appropriate, and I think it's also work group dependent. So I would say, like, if that is something that would be helpful for the project manager to do on that work group, I think that's a great great thing to ask them about. And I know for other work groups that I'm a part of, that might not be the best role. So I think it's a great idea and definitely something to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see another question from Fran about Scale 3.0. Curious not only about Scale 3.0 submitted to the RWJF and also any other connections to other interested foundations. That's a great question, Fran. I also want to share, I made a mistake earlier. It's not technically Scale 3.0 since it's not like an extension of Scale. It's a renewal grant and sort of the next phase of work, which will look very different. And so I want to clarify that. Apologies for using that term earlier. And the connections to other interested foundations, I'm not sure I have this information yet. I'm happy to pass along that question to others as well.
This is Sarah. It seems like there's a lot of questions about the renewal funding. And as Liz said, we haven't yet received confirmation that we're getting it. But I will bring that back to Paul. I'm going to talk to him tomorrow, and maybe we need to spend some time. It sounds like people are saying we need to spend some time letting people know what's coming. So I'll bring that back so that we can keep you guys in the loop. But right now, as of now, we haven't yet heard back the final word on the funding. So we're not keeping anything back, but it's clear that there's a lot of questions about what it's going to look like. So I'll make sure that we can plan for a conversation about that either on this call or in some other way. Is that helpful?
It looks like yes. Laura would be curious to know the buckets and areas of focus submitted.
Okay.
And Fran is curious about synergies with the movement as well.
Okay. I'll write all that down.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that.
No problem at all.
Great. And then I see Bernice also asked about the live stories to replace the implementation guide as a deliverable in terms of expectations. I think that the implementation guide is sort of the meat, like what we'll be working on, for example, with people with lived experience, and then live stories could be the medium for that. So like that particular product could live on live stories. I think it's kind of a both and I want to underscore again that, you know, we didn't do implementation guides in the past. What we had done previously were synergy or synthesis reports, because at the time that was what made sense in our learning process, and now we're in a different place. And so a lot of this is going to be kind of learning as we go. You know, as we've mentioned, the guides that we've shared with you all are truly templates that can be modified and changed to meet the audience's needs. And even the venue or where that template lives can vary depending on what the work group needs are or what you think might be best. So it could be, it could be that the implementation guide is a companion with live stories, or the implementation guide itself could be a live stories. I think it's really up to the work group, individual work groups, to decide how they think the material will best live. The cool thing about live stories is that you can download a PDF version, so we could still get that in a document if we needed it. So there really is a lot of flexibility in sort of both what an implementation guide or a change package looks like, and then also the means or where it lives. Whether that's in Google, live stories, the change library, it truly is up to the work groups to decide that. Thank you, Shameka and Bernice. I appreciate your questions. I'm conscious that we we're intending to end this call at 2:23, so I am going to skip to the next steps, and I'm available by email for any other questions that are still bubbling up as well. Our next meeting will be June 26th at the same time from 1 to 2:20 Eastern. And this was just a reminder that to add in the updates and synergies for the next call. You'll see that Chelsea actually already included a trustee tab there for the next work group call. And so just a reminder to please add in your updates so that the next call we can spend more time hearing from folks rather than adding updates. And as Laura asked before, who adds those updates is truly, again, up to the work groups. And Sarah is going to let the directors know about folks' questions about the renewal grant. I also captured a bunch of other next steps in the chat that I'll have to pull out as well. I'm not sure I'm going to be super nimble in getting those to speak aloud. And we'll make sure that we send those out in the follow-up email with the slides and also documents that were included in this PowerPoint. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoons and mornings for some of you.